It's that time of the year again, everybody. The Steam Next Fest is on, running from June 19th until June 26th. And if you're unfamiliar, this is an opportunity to get your grubby little hands on all of the new games, with free demos available across the week. In this video, of course, we'll be taking a look at some highlights. 7 brilliant games from across the strategy, simulation, city building, and maybe a little bit of RPG thrown in the mix genres. We're going to take a look at what the Steam Next Fest 2023 has to offer. My name is JumboPixel, and with our YouTube housekeeping well and truly out of the way and time cards below, let's go. Starting with something pretty spicy, this is Stellaris Nexus. And of course you'll recognize Stellaris if you are at all familiar with strategy games, and yes, this is the same, what I guess is now a franchise. Stellaris Nexus is something a little bit different though. Published by Paradox Arc, developed by Whatboy Games, Paradox Arc is Paradox's arm that's more interested in indie titles, bringing something a little bit different, perhaps a slightly slimmed down, cheaper experience too. And that's what Stellaris Nexus aims to deliver, bringing the 4X genre into what should be around 45 minutes to an hour. That's right, one session, one game of Stellaris Nexus is aimed to take around 60 minutes of your time. To do that, of course, as you can see by the gameplay footage, and we'll explore some trailers as well to get a full view of the games that we're looking at in this video, it is stripped back. Combat more automated and simple, the graphics too. Many have likened it to a mobile game in how it's approached the massive world of Stellaris and brought it down into a more simplified experience. However, I would argue that is perhaps slightly diminishing of what it actually offers. What it aims to deliver is the Stellaris experience with up to 6 players in a largely, of course, actually extremely focused multiplayer experience, a PvP experience. With up to 6 players, it's still fairly wide-reaching, and despite some of those simplifications, it's actually quite an interesting world. I'd encourage you to check out Stellaris Nexus for a pinch of Stellaris at a fraction of the time. Moving on to the next item on my list, something a little more relaxing, Station to Station. Station to Station is probably one of the most relaxing titles on this list, actually. It's a simulation game and a puzzle game. It takes quite a minimalist approach, as you can see. The idea being there are different resources, in this case buildings on the map, and you have to connect them with railway lines. You'll often have a budget that you're dealing with, and there'll be sort of cards or abilities each turn that you might need to manage. Sometimes it might be that your bridges are cheaper and you have a certain amount of money to connect all of the resources on the map. If you are left over with, say, $1,000 at the end, then you'll score extra bonus points. The station-to-station demo is fairly straightforward with 3 levels on offer, but I think that it gives you enough of a taste at what the game delivers. The UI is fairly satisfying and easy to use in my experience, a fairly bug-free one at that. Pixel art style I think is broadly appealing, although of course I'll let you ultimately be the judge, but even, the animations of when you connect a territory and it sort of brings life, nature and color into it, I think all of the small details around Station to Station help it achieve its goal of being a really relaxing puzzler game. So if you want to step back from some of the more intense or simply the overload of all the new things in Steam Next Fest, I think that Station to Station will be the experience for you. The next item on my list, Shadow Gambit, takes a slightly different approach. This time we're looking at an RPG experience, and this one combines, I think, really great elements of tactical RPG combat and broader strategy games inside of what is probably the smoothest experience we have on the list. This game performs really well, the animations are really satisfying, and for what it's worth, the art style is colorful and punchy, and it draws me in for more. The setting is that you're a pirate of a ghost ship, and you're tasked with carrying out these sort of epic heists to salvage treasure. These heists effectively, if you will, acting as levels inside of the strategy game. You'll go on the heist with a crew of pirates, I believe up to 8 shipmates, and each one of them is a playable character. And in the same way that you might take a mission on with a selection of characters in a game like XCOM, here you're establishing your pirate crew, each one with, of course, different personalities, different armaments, and unique special powers. The ship itself acts effectively as your base of operation, allowing you to upgrade it with resources, etc., that you may gather across the different heists. And inside of the heists themselves, these missions, of course, you'll bring your crew, where you have a special ability, sort of a time manipulation mechanic, if you will, of your ship, allowing you to pause time, consider your options, queue up multiple characters and multiple actions, that kind of turn-based mechanic effectively coming through. I think it's a really solid experience. Next up, we have Jumplight Odyssey. Jumplight Odyssey is a strategy simulation game at its core, and it might remind you of something like FTL, perhaps with some bad neighbor elements thrown into the mix as well, because this is, much like FTL, a colony sim in space, and it's about management as well, something of course that runs through a lot of the games on this list, but it's important to note that this one in particular has some quite strong colony management settings to it too. This effectively everlasting road-like experience and exploration of space, you'll of course run into many familiar mechanics, but I think that this game does it particularly well. Things like disasters that will emerge on side your colony ship, or potentially the specific dynamics of crew relations as well. They'll all of course continue to go about and live normal lives, working jobs. Each one will have their own needs that you'll need to fulfill as you move through what is also a story-driven world, because there are plenty of elements of story hidden inside of the missions. Not just simple story like, say, battling against a hostile boarding party that might come up against you, but a sort of a broader, overarching setting. This case, it's a man by the name of Admiral Volton and the warmongering Zootopans, but ultimately, I think what that does is it helps ground the game in a broader mission. So you have your roguelike, you have your almost sort of, day-by-day colony management elements, but then you have this overarching story too. I think that Jumplight Odyssey is well worth your time. If you've played games similar to it, you'll be right at home with how it functions, and something that's slightly different. Next up on my list, we have Revival Recolonization, and this one I've put here specifically for 4X fans, because I think that this, for perhaps the first time in a while, with the exclusion of Age of Wonders 4, delivers a 4X experience that you can really sink your teeth into. Revival Recolonization is set in a post-apocalyptic version of Earth where few have survived, but of course those that have survived are familiar with the human experience. So unlike, say, a purely historical strategy game, Humankind, Civilization 5 or 6, we're not starting as Neanderthals from nothing, but instead we're sort of in a more post-apocalyptic round 2, if you will, Earth. Of course, the idea is to revive and thrive, and inside of what is a very familiar tile-based hexagonal 4X strategy game setting, that's exactly what we'll try and do. Now, of course, Revival Recolonization is a relatively indie game, developed and published, in this case, by HeroCraft PC. Looking through their Steam library, I saw some strategy games, sort of a mixture of things in there, but overall, I would note that despite being an indie experience, you'll see on screen from the gameplay that we're looking at that it's also a very familiar 4X experience. Its graphics kind of reminding me personally a little bit of Old World, maybe slightly more colorful, but what you'll also feel is the very familiar settings of a 4X strategy game. You'll notice, of course, the tiles, obviously hexagonal, but also the yields up in the top left, things like money and research, the way that your units move around the map and then engage in combat. Of course, it's familiar. There is a sci-fi fantasy twist here as well, though it's not purely ground in recreating the human experience from the ground up, because of course this is a slightly fantasy world. Customization and development in cities is fairly familiar, if not slightly more simple than some other games, but it also reaches into areas that others may not. Its unit editor and customization options are, especially for an indie game, quite impressive. And the way that you sort of can terraform the world, destroy the world, and manipulate it around you offers more options than most. It is, in that sense, a slightly more customizable 4X experience, although again, still very much grounded in the core that you would probably expect. Now, it's important to note, of course, that this video is focused on the Steam Next Fest, mostly on either new demos or things that have been significantly changed, to give us an idea of what new experiences are on offer. But I thought that I would mention here that Revival Colonization, unlike most, but not all other entries on this list, is releasing really soon, like almost at the conclusion of the Steam Next Fest. It, of course, runs from the 19th to the 26th of June, and then this game releases around the 28th, 29th of June, I think, depending on your time zone. So it's a really good way to get a look at what we would expect to be quite a developed, well-rounded, well-polished 4X strategy experience that we can get our grubby little hands on the full version of right thereafter. So think about this not just as a first look demo or a teaser demo like it and others may be, but also a look at a new strategy game that's coming out in but a couple of weeks, and you'll get to play it and try it here for free. And the next entry on my list, One Lonely Outpost, actually follows a similar vibe, with the demo being followed hotly by the release of the game. This is a colony sim, and a farming colony sim at that. In a way, kind of like a slightly more 3D approach at Stardew Valley. Of course, now wildly popular, and rightly so, but with a different setting. Here you are, the one lonely colonist on an outpost, and of course, as you explore the map, the world around you, and gather resources, you'll start to make this place a little bit more hospitable, because while it may start as a lonely outpost, it is your goal, using your space RV, this kind of multi-purpose tech gauntlet that you use to terraform and create, sort of shape the world around you. As you grow, develop that farm, you'll also grow a colony, and with that, you'll attract new people to what will hopefully be a life-sustaining colony that you've created for yourself, and potentially up to dozens of other colonists too. With them, of course, will come a story, the more RPG elements that you'll start to lean into as you develop relationships between characters, and of course ultimately use them to build an economy, gathering new resources, new production techniques, new blueprints and methods. This follows a similar structure to other farming and colony sims that we've seen, but with a sci-fi element and its desire to terraform and to turn this place into a hospitable colony for more travelers. I think that One Lonely Outpost has a great story and theme to it as well, and it's a hot pick on this list. And finally, we have For the King 2. Now, For the King 1 was a very popular game, an adventure and RPG game, but also, and sort of slightly different from the other things on our list, presenting itself much more like a board game as well, with turn-based tactics thrown into the mix. For the King 2, over its predecessor, delivers up to 4-player co-op as you move through its sequel. It's a turn-based, roguelike tabletop RPG, is how I would sort of summarize it and bring it all together. Inside of it, you will, as you move through the combat and the world, level up your characters, explore the roguelike world, and ultimately push to unlock the beloved Queen's terrible secret. Thank you so much for joining me today as we took a look at 7 brilliant games in the Steam Next Fest. Now, these games aren't alone. Let me know your recommendations below, and if there's appetite for it, I'm happy to come back and take a look at some more hot picks. Until then, everybody, enjoy the free games. I'll see you next time.